Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us,
and some that didn't.
Best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started.
See another sunrise, sing a little song.
We are back, Jesse. It is good to see you again. And man, we got like a windy, blustery, sort of stormy day today, which is, we might get some rain. I don't know, Seattle, what you got?
We're deep in the weeds of winter weather, but we've actually had some good sunny weather. My grass is growing, which means I have to start mowing pretty soon. So
Nice.
we're getting to the back end of our winter stretch. So enjoying a little bit of 60 degrees and t-shirt weather out here. That's t-shirt weather, Jason.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's we had like 50 degrees and my kids all have shorts on. I'm like, guys.
Right. Well, yeah, that's a teenager problem, I think, more than
That's
anything.
right. That's right.
Like it.
Today, so the next two episodes, we want to just kind of drill down on some really, really practical things.
Yeah.
A lot of questions that I get asked are, Jason, how did you, when you first came to your church and things were a certain way, how did you start to move the culture into what it is now? And I always tell people it's a slow burn. It's not something that we did overnight. It took years to sort of get where we wanted it to be. And we're always working on it, because setting a culture is not a stagnant thing. It's always very dynamic. And especially if you're in the Presbyterian system, you have new leaders every year. So you got to keep the conversation going, make sure that we're sort of fine tuning what we're trying to do. But what I want to tackle is one of the questions that I used to ask of churches like North Point and stuff that would have things dialed in with their elder board or their leadership team or their meetings. I just want to know, what are they doing? What have they figured out that we haven't? And so in that spirit, I just want to share some things that we figured out. And Jesse, I know you guys have too, about how do we have a greater impact with fewer meetings? I remember there's a point several years ago when I went through a stretch where I had meetings almost every night of the week. And this is quite a few years ago. This is probably like 6-7 years ago. My kids were still pretty small. And I remember coming home and thinking, this is not sustainable. I got to figure something else out. And it just happened very slowly. It used to be we had like a meeting night where all the teams or committees would meet at the same time. We'd start with a little time of worship and they'd all break up into different parts of the room. And it was always a little corny, but at the same time, it was smart because it's concentrating your things into one night. And then, well, we can't do Wednesday night, so we're going to do Tuesday. Oh, we can't do Wednesday, so we're going to do Thursday. And all of a sudden, all the meetings spread out so that there was meetings constantly. And that book, Death by Meeting, right? I mean, this is the Presbyterian way, dude. This is like we invent committees so that we can nominate committees. I mean, and I know people, God love them, they've never been to a meeting they didn't like. They can't have enough meetings. Whatever that does for them, a lot of it's fellowship or feeling like they're a part of things. But man, if we're just trading time in meetings for time with our spouse or kids, I think we're missing it. Or time for ourselves, we're missing it. Did you hit a point like that, Jesse, when you sort of realized like, oh my goodness, I can't keep going like this with meetings?
Yeah, for sure. And I would say Marine View, where I am, is a little bit unique in that our previous senior pastor had already laid some of the groundwork for let's not just meet to meet, and had already kind of been front-ending some of the conversation about, listen, if meetings are your primary place of fellowship, we don't need to have more meetings. We need to help you find some other outlets for that, and sort of repositioning even that conversation, right? And so, so I felt somewhat set up for success. But then when John retired and I was now the transitional pastor, and then soon after that, the senior pastor, there was a lot of meetings that ended up on my schedule because everybody wants the pastor there for their conversation, for their meeting. And so then I had to kind of go back to work again to set a culture around how our meetings going to work, What are the expectations for my presence there? Do we really need all of these committee meetings all the time, once a month? What's the rhythm of our meetings? And all of those things, I think, warrant evaluation and just kind of coming up for air, because and kind of taking a look. And one of the things we talk about sometimes is that when you're working in it, it's really hard to work on it. And what this conversation today, and we're talking through some of these topics, is an invitation to just step out of working in it for a minute to think about working on it. What would be a better way or a different way that would be maybe healthier for you or for your teams to approach meetings? Is there a way forward through that? So I'm grateful for the conversation, because I think it's going to look different in each setting, but the principles are important. How do we go from meeting for meeting's sake to thinking in terms of impact and meeting as needed, for the things that we want to try to do? And so anyway, I'm looking forward to diving into this. I think there's a lot to say here, so I don't want to say it all at once.
Yeah, no, that's good. No, my favorite coffee mug that a staff member gave me a few years ago says, "This meeting should have been an email."
Yeah,
and
right.
I don't, but whenever I think about that gift, I wonder, are they telling me that I'm having too many meetings and it should be an email, or are they laughing alongside me because I say stuff like that all the time?
Probably some of both. Jason.
Probably some of both. Exactly right. So here's what I've learned. Here's what works for me is I came to a point where I said, look, let me take all these meetings off my plate, not forever, just for right now. If I figuratively just sort of put them all to the side, and so I just have this blank calendar in front of me, I want to ask a couple important questions before I put anything back on the calendar. For me, it was 3 questions. The first was, what do I really need to be present for in every area of my life? What do I really need to be present for? And I could find in the rhythm of my calendar, these are the times I need to be present for my family, for my kids. I'm going to try to make the baseball game. I'm going to try it, right? I need to be present. I need to be present at this time of day with my family. And it's not always a lot, but it's very, very intentional. I just think about it in terms of what's going to get on my calendar and what's going to get protected. I want to put those things on first. If I take a day off, I want to get that early on the calendar and protect it. That's question 1. What must I be present for? Not just physically, but emotionally. Like, how am I present? The second question is, what do I want to be present for? What really fires me up? What really gets me excited about life and ministry? When it comes to church leadership, what are the things that just really, if I meet with X team or with X leaders, these are the things that give me life. And I'm a big fan of following the signs of life, where you get excited. I think that's a thing to lean into. So what do I want to be present? What must I be present for? What do I want to be present for? And then lastly, what days will I absolutely not have meetings? Absolutely not. So again, a day off, maybe another day in the week when I know that I need to pace myself or I'm going to be burned up. I don't know if you get like this, Jesse, but I know that if I'm too overscheduled, I start really losing steam. I start really losing my ability to actually lead well because I just got way too many meetings going on.
Yeah. Well, and I think your creativity can dry up in there too, which makes it tough. And I think for me, there's always a balance between not enough meetings and too many meetings, because if I don't, and what I mean by meetings is sometimes it's pastoral, just counseling meetings or conversations or discipleship kind of opportunities with people. I include that in sort of some meeting time, but you kind of need this rhythm of what brings you life and then what's going to drain you, and kind of figuring out how to organize your week to have a rhythm around that. What's going to fill you up, what's going to drain your batteries. And that takes self-awareness and some proactive planning ahead, like you're talking about. What's the set of questions that I want to ask that's going to help me populate my calendar with meetings and help me to say no to meetings at times when I know it's actually not going to be good. So, for me, I don't do meetings ever on Monday, except for when you and I record, because this is a little separate. This is you and I.
Yeah.
Loud. And then I basically stick any night meetings are Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. I don't do them on Friday. I don't do them on Monday. Don't even ask me about Saturday. And Sunday is, we've got our community group in the evening that I'm a part of. So it's really tied into that window. And sometimes I'll stack meetings in those evenings when I'm available for a meeting or something like that. So I think what's the rhythm of what's going to bring you life and where your batteries are going to be drained, and don't overpopulate your calendar in any given week with that stuff that's just going to kind of suck the life out of you. You might be able to handle it one week, but not over time.
Yeah, exactly. And we all have seasons where you just have more meetings than usual. It just makes sure that season doesn't turn into a really long season. Okay, so then what do you do with the rest? So if you answer those 3 questions and you just kind of put some stakes in the ground, or these are the areas I'm going to protect, then I think it's a 2-pronged approach. Prong number 1 is evaluate. And I would start with evaluating your standing meetings. These are meetings that you have if you're Presbyterian, with your elders, with your session, with staff, if you have staff, or volunteer leaders, if you have volunteer leaders. Do we need to, the question is, do we need to meet always and forever at this day and time, every single month, every single week, every single whatever? That's a really important question to ask. And it's the question that usually doesn't get asked, because we always have deacons the second Tuesday of whatever it is. Yeah, but do we actually need it? There was a post that I saw of it was a Presbyterian person, and they posted their meeting notes from their session meeting, and they were actually kind of slamming the pastor a bit. But the meeting schedule, basically they wrote out pastor opened in prayer and a devotion from Daily Bread. Then pastor reviewed the financial spreadsheet, which, in parentheses, it was the same exact sheet as last month. It wasn't even updated. Next, there was some talk about who signed up for flowers and coffee hour. Next, there was some criticism of the pastor's sermon that they were too political. Lastly, we adjourned with prayer. You don't need to meet if that's your meeting, right? And by the way, I've got a lot of other questions about mission, vision, strategy, but if you find yourself struggling to come up with a meeting agenda, or the agenda looks exactly like the same talking points as the month before, I think you really need to question, do we need to have this meeting?
Yeah. And
maybe you go to every other month, or once a quarter, or twice a year, whatever that looks like. But that's, I think, the first place to start. So as by way of example, in the fall, we talked about this, that we were going to experiment with our session meetings. And session meetings traditionally had been every month, 3rd Tuesday night of every month. And we weren't getting the best energy out of our team, usually because it's like a Tuesday night after everyone's just home from a long day at work. And I thought if we had fewer meetings, but maybe went a little bit longer and had some better energy, we'd get a better result. So this year we did something we never did before, is we didn't have a meeting every month, and we did a couple of Saturdays mixed in here, Saturday mornings. Now, again, Saturday morning's not ideal for young families, but if you give them enough advance notice, usually they can pull it off and be there. And my goodness, Jesse, the energy changed completely. So a Saturday morning for an hour and a half, it's like 3 hours worth of a Tuesday night we could get done in an hour and a half on a Saturday. Everybody's energy's good. They're excited. They're kind of rested, ready to go. And then we were doing that every other month. And in the off months, we do an optional Zoom check-in meeting. We're not conducting any business. We're just saying that this is how things are going. This is a follow-up to this. Are there any questions about what we're doing? Here's the upcoming calendar. And it's about maybe 20, 30 minutes tops.
Nice.
And it's working great. It really is. So, but that's an example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Just evaluating, is this still the best way to do this? And I think, sometimes we feel like some of those meetings are out of bounds to even consider. And so did you get pushback? What was the feedback from the church and
No.
others?
No, everybody's on board with fewer meetings, at least
Yeah.
in my church. They're
So
happy.
I think sometimes we don't do things out of a perceived fear or concern that people are going to push back. I think I shared this maybe in that same conversation. Even we had moved our session meetings to Sunday nights to try and create a little more space, have some food, have some conversation, and it ended up not working. Sunday nights just weren't the right time. People are getting ready for their week. It's kind of family night. It's different things like that. But we were willing to try something different to see what might work. Because I think a lot of us, if you're a pastor listening or even an elder, you're listening and you're like, yeah, second, third Tuesday night meetings from 7 till 9. I'm just tired. Everybody's tired. It's not our best. And so it's not that you can't get good things done if you organize that meeting well, but is that really the most effective way to be doing it now? And maybe you need to stop and evaluate. Maybe even ask your team, risk asking your elders, what do you think we should be doing with our time, and when should we be doing this? Now, that's a little bit risky. So that not for the faint of heart to do.
Yeah, be careful about that. So
Yeah.
So evaluate your standing meetings. Then the second thing is to evaluate the amount of time you spend in all meetings, not just standing meetings, but the meetings that you choose to take every week. How much time are you spending in meetings?
Yeah.
Now, listen, I'm not going to say meetings are very important.
They are, yeah.
And we're going to talk about how you get more juice out of those meetings.
Mhm.
But you have to first just take a step back and see, like, well, how much of my time in a week is devoted to meetings? And is there anything I can delegate?
Yeah.
Or anything I can eliminate? I don't want to waste my volunteers' time. I don't want to waste my time. Actually, the worst thing, in my opinion, you could do with volunteers is make them feel like they wasted their time.
Yeah.
And that happens when you just have unnecessary meetings. People want to know, why is this meeting necessary? How are we moving the ball down the field? And what are my next steps?
Mhm.
And if the meeting can't really address those things, then I would question whether or not you need it.
Yeah. And yeah, that's a really important point. Is I think sometimes too, thinking about the caliber of our meetings, as we're going to get into, will help us understand which ones can be eliminated. If we're having to dredge up energy to create an agenda, to think creatively about a meeting, it might be something we're like, man, I got to figure out how to fill my batteries back up for this meeting. But it could be an indication that something needs to change, or that meeting could be eliminated, or something along those lines. And I would say the other cautionary tale on the other side of eliminating meetings is I got so good at that, I wasn't in enough meetings anymore.
Yeah.
And I didn't even go too far the other way. I remember maybe it was Alan Hirsch or someone like that says, maybe you need to repent of having set too good of boundaries. And I was like, what? We're taught to create great boundaries in ministry and have room for our family and to be a whole person as we lead. And I think the implication was sometimes you can get a little too good at that and maybe get a little too loose in your absence around really important conversations in the life of the church. So for me, it was managing back towards, after eliminating a bunch of meetings, which meetings really do I need to be a part of where I can bring value and actually help move the organization forward?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the flip side of elimination. You might need to add some if they're missing.
No, that's a good corrective. And then I think it's considering most of the thing that kind of disrupts everything else during our week is when we have sort of a drop-in situation of people wanting to meet with the pastor.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying, some churches, that just may be the perfect culture for you. For me, and for our situation here, it didn't work because there's just too many other things I needed to devote my time to. And what happened was, if I would want to say yes to everybody, and it's always, hey, pastor, 2 minutes, right? Which is 20 at least. But then I didn't have time to really do the deep work on things I needed to work on because I was so meetinged out. So one of the best things we ever did was to move from a drop-in to an appointment-based approach to one-on-one meetings.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of ways to do this. You could use something simple like a scheduler, like Calendly or something like that, and have set hours that you're available and have people sign up for those hours. That works great. if you have a person, an actual human who can run interference and to help schedule meetings, that's even better, because then somebody gets like a friendly response, like, oh, hey, he's not available, but next week on Wednesday he's got a slot open, and you could tell that. The best thing is you could tell that person what your slots are, so they don't have to give a reason like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, Thursday's not going to work, but he's got something on Friday at 8 or whatever. That's something that absolutely changed everything when we went to an appointment-based approach to one-on-one meetings.
Mhm.
And people say, well, what do you do with emergencies? Emergencies are emergencies. You deal with them right away. You don't make them schedule a meeting. Yeah. But there are way fewer emergencies than I think we imagine.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about, it's not about limiting accessibility. It's just being wise about how you make yourself accessible, right? So this is not about Jason sitting off in his office doing, scrolling Instagram videos and working on his sermon and not being bothered by people. This is about you being a wise steward of your time and energy and the priorities around your role. And it's easy for a short conversation to hijack. Maybe that's too strong of a word, to kind of get in the way of the rhythm that's going to work for successful sermon writing or other meeting prep you're going to do, or even to get ready for another something going on. And so it is about stewardship. And I think there's, it sounds like you guys go with the appointment-based thing. I was talking to another pastor that does basically office hours. If you want to stop by from 1 to 3, I'm just in my office working on odds and ends. You're welcome to pop in. So if you want to pop in, that's the time to do it. I like having a heads up of what the conversation is going to be about.
Well, that's just it. I don't want to get blindsided.
Yeah. So the pop in, if it's an elder or something, I almost always say yes to a pop in meeting. If it's a staff member or an elder, I'm like, okay, it must be important enough for me to give you time here to talk about this. But it's important to me when someone comes in and says, hey, can I meet with Jesse? Our awesome staff team says, well, what's it about? And, when's a good time for you to do that? He can't meet right at this moment or whatever. So it's just having a little bit of a filter too, so that you're more ready for that meeting. I very rarely take meetings with people who say, I need to talk to you about something, but don't tell me what it is. Yeah. Like, it's just, well, if you can't tell me what it is, then how can I be prepared for a conversation about it? That it really hasn't been a situation in a while, but so say that again. Calendly, is that the one you use?
Yeah, you can use Calendly. It's very simple. There's a free version, and you could set up your calendar and you tell the software, these are my available appointment hours, and then people can just sign up if they have a link. You can put that link at the bottom of your email signature if you want.
Yeah, and there's a few of those. There's a Ranger. There's a few others.
Yeah.
And basically, you go on and it shows, oh, Jason's available Tuesday at 11:30, 12:30, and 1, on Wednesday at 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, and then they pick and it RSVPs it, cements it in your calendar. You confirm. And now you have an appointment, and there's a box there that says, what's the purpose of the meeting? You can invite them to fill that out. So I think using that technology is a really good way to handle a lot of those important contact, relational ministry kinds of meetings and set you up for success without having your whole week sort of gone sideways because 2 hours of your time got eaten up unexpectedly.
Yeah. And two things you said I think are really important. One is I do take drop-in meetings from staff and elders pretty much no matter what, unless I really can't get away from what I'm doing. They have that sort of accessibility.
They have that kind of access to you. And all my elders have my cell phone number, and they can text me, call me, those kinds of things. And I'll either respond or not, depending on what's going on. But, we want to create accessibility wisely. And how do we do that? Yeah. And
that was the other thing that you said was about it. We don't want to be inaccessible to our congregation. And I'm always, whenever I think about this, I think about a story that someone who came to our church from another church, she had moved different parts of the country. So she wasn't just hopping, but she moved here and she goes, the first time I met my pastor, well, no, she said the only time I ever met my pastor at my last church was at his book signing in the church fellowship hall. Pastor was never accessible to the people. And maybe it was such a large church that was hard to do, but either way, I don't know. I'm not a fan.
I've never had that problem, partly because I've never written a book, but you're about to have that problem. Your book's coming
it's
across.
Not a book they're going to be interested in, I promise.
Okay, fair.
That's a great selling point. And we're going to sell a lot of books that way. So anyway, Now let's talk about the quality,
Mhm.
the quality of the meetings, because and this is the last part I want to touch on is I think a way to sort of squeeze some more juice out of meetings and to make sure that they are moving the needle is I think meetings need to be about looking forward more than looking backward. That's different than evaluating something like a program or something you just did. That's not what I mean. I mean, how are we exciting or inspiring, whether it's one-on-one with our elder board, or whatever that looks like? Where are we following the signs of life that the Holy Spirit is showing us? Where are we pushing toward fruit of the Spirit? Where are we moving toward faithfulness? What is God doing in all of this? I think our meetings need to have an element of that, because otherwise everything becomes too routine or even rote. I think it needs to be invigorated with, hey, what is God doing through this thing that we're doing as a committee, as a team, as a elder board?
Yeah, and then to really invest in that time in a way that makes it worthwhile. And so if the whole meeting is about reporting on what happened the last month, even if it's in celebration and this happened and this happened and this happened, if your whole meeting is just a series of reports from your ministry areas, that could be a document.
Right.
And we do when we do we call session monthly check-ins. I have all of our ministry teams send a couple of sentences. What was a ministry highlight? What's a key number that you'd like to share? What's a prayer request? And I can't remember what the other one. Anyway, but there's 4 things that we have everybody just kind of chime in on, so that session goes, oh, this is what's happening. We don't unpack that document unless somebody's like, hey, I wanted to mention this was really cool, and I just wanted to celebrate that. So checking in is good, reporting is good, but it should not be the focus of the meeting, because that's just a backwards looking. What I hear you saying is that, evaluation is important and good. It sets us up for the future, but it should be, what are we going to do better next time or differently next time? Or where are we going from here to improve or to pursue our mission going forward, not just looking back.
Yeah.
So which window's biggest in the car, Jason? You always
That's right. The windshield, baby.
Come on.
Got to see in front of you.
Yeah.
And then kind of the third thing is get people thinking, whether it's one-on-one or in groups, get them thinking about how God is present, how God is showing up. Like, don't just pay attention to the sociological reality of a meeting, but the supernatural reality of a meeting. If you do that, I'm telling you, that is a game changer.
Yeah.
When people start perceiving that God he's in this work that we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Because
what do you do? How do you create that environment?
We talk all the time about God sightings. That's one way that we do it, where we just we go around and we share, hey, where have you seen God showed up since the last time we met? And some people share personal things, some people share church things. And what it does is the more people do it, when you first start, it's really awkward and they sort of don't know what to say. But as you go, they get better at it. And it's like, it's just noticing and expecting God to be there. And you know what it does? It's sort of like, I remember when I was a waiter, I was waiting tables to make some extra money back in my youth ministry days. I was such a terrible waiter, by the way. I was terrible. I was way too slow. There's always like the one waitress that could run the entire restaurant herself easily. Yeah. And I was just, chipping into her tips. It's one of those things. But the lesson that one of those servers taught me is when you're carrying the tray of drinks, don't stare at the glasses. That's how you spill. The key is you don't look at the glasses, you look in front of you. You look to where you're going. And I think if you're looking to where you're going and expecting God to show up and be there, you're not worried about the problems or the frustrations or don't let that distract you, because that will ensure a spill. Keep moving forward. And I think we do that by just sort of sharing, hey, this is where God's showing up. And isn't this exciting? And this really feels like God's doing this thing. And where do you think God wants to take us? Right. So there's some dreaming, there's some imagining. Again, I'm just a big fan of that. Looking forward.
Yeah. Keeping that eye on the horizon. I think, and there's something when you're a part of a leadership team that's doing that, it also brings in a certain type of person that is invigorated by sort of forward thinking and is not so much, I love reports. It's sort of like
Yeah.
changes the caliber of the team too over time. And so, or caliber is maybe not the right word. We need people who care about numbers and reports and things. But certainly in your senior leadership team, that's a vision oriented, forward looking, where is the Lord leading us kind of team. And so I think if that's where you spend your time, people are going to gravitate toward that have some gifts and abilities in that arena as well. So it's going to shape your team over time.
All right, listen, brothers and sisters in Christ, cut a few meetings, man. No.
What's your assignment this week? Pick a meeting and cancel it. See what happens.
Oh, man. I was listening
Truly,
to
Jason, I think that's like if we all did that one thing that we could cut out, one meeting, and if the ball that is held up by that meeting is important enough and it falls to the ground, we'll find a way to pick it up, right? But it might be that you go, you know what, maybe every other month would be okay for this. Or maybe this is an email meeting and we were mistaking it for something else. So this is really important. This is how do we create longevity and sustainability in our ministry, keep our sanity, keep a healthy work-life, family balance, all those things. So it cuts right to the heart of our ability to do our work well over the long run. So crucially important conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's just sort of as a last comment on this, I think if the majority of our time is spent in meetings or in sermon prep, where's our time out with the people, out with the community, outside the walls of the church?
Yeah.
There's just so much time to go around. I just think it's really
important. I think that's maybe we come back to that question. We tried an experiment. I need to come back to this. This made me think of this. But for a while there, we were saying to all of our staff that we're going to tithe 10% of our time out into the community in some way. And I don't know that we were quite ready for that. So some of our folks were like, we're going to pay people to not be here and go help other organizations. What are we doing? But I think I'm going to come back to that. That made me think of that. Anyway.
I love it. All right. Well, hey, thanks everyone for listening. Next week, we're going to be talking a bit, again, just kind of in this really practical lane, 5 moves to cultivate a healthy elder board. So we talked a little bit about elder boards, and there are some moves we can make, whatever that looks like for you, whether you are, have a session like the Presbyterians or whatever your version of that board is, 5 moves to make it healthier. So we're going to do that together. And reach out to us anytime, Jason or Jesse at reclaimleader.com. Thanks so much for listening. As we always say, ministry is hard. It is so much better when we do it together.